Thank you.
That's such a sweetheart.
Today's scripture comes from the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, verses 14 through 30. And Jesus said, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his workers and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy servant, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless servant, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" May God add a blessing to the word.
Go out those pledge cards.
Get a nice background music wall.
It's good hard hearing.
Well, this parable is a challenge like so many parables that Jesus teaches. There's parables of the foolish virgins that was the lectionary last week. There's the parable of the fig tree. There's the parable of the lost coin. There's the parable of the prodigal son, and you get the idea. There's a lot of parables. But what I know is that Jesus uses these stories, which is a parable, to direct the hearer's attention to the issues at hand. He kind of relates it kind of like what George did when George tells a story, or what Vicky did when Vicky tells a story. It's about that impact that it has on you and the importance of it. And so by directing the attention this week, Jesus, I believe, there's 3 things that I saw in this passage. It's faithfulness, being prepared, and being willing to take a risk. Faithfulness, being prepared, and willing to take a risk. The story we hear about this servant who buried their money that he had been given, instead of circulating it in the world and multiplying its value, I often wonder why so many people still bury their talents today instead of using them for the glory of God. I believe God is a God of abundance.
Yes.
I truly believe that. And we are to use what we have been given for the glory of God. we forget to take steps of faithfulness in our giving. A lot of people, all they do is talk about money. Well, Jesus talked about money more times than not. Is right. And I believe that that every life has potential. Every life has potential if you are open to live it instead of burying it and making up excuses about why you don't do something.
That's right.
Like give, like use your gifts, use your talents, fill in the blank. So if we're faithful and we're prepared, then there's going to be some risk involved, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time we don't want to think about giving as a responsibility. But giving is a responsibility. I went to the dictionary course and to look up responsibility. And there's one definition stuck out. It says, a duty or obligation to a satisfactory performance or completion of a task, assigned by someone or created by one's own promise or circumstances that one must fulfill, and which has consequence penalty for failure. So, I don't know about you, but I've had some responsibilities in my life. How many of us have had responsibilities? Never? Well, maybe some responsibility. You know, when I was growing up, my responsibility was to take out the trash. Oh, brother. And my other responsibility was to pick up after our 2 dogs. We had 2 big dogs. Oh, joy. And my other responsibility was to do the dishes. And I shared that task with my older sister. And I could never convince her to do them for me. Right? So I had these responsibilities growing up, and I didn't think that they were pleasant at the time. I still kind of don't, but I do them. And none of these responsibilities really inspired, oh, joy, I get to pick out the trash. Oh, joy, I get to pick up dog poo. Yippee! It wasn't enthusiastic to me, and it didn't encourage me a lot of times, but it was a responsibility at the time. And sometimes, with responsibility, I wish that I didn't have. And maybe I'm not alone. Maybe you have some of those in your life. But I see today some people who tend not to emphasize faith, responsibility. Now, there's a point where, yes, God does love everybody, and we invite people to come in, but there's a responsibility to your faith. There's a responsibility to living a life of faith anyways. Sadly, that happens. But then we come to this text from the Gospel of Matthew. And we run smack dab into this, my nemesis, responsibility. Responsibility. At least I can't read the parable of the talents without recognizing that taking responsibility is a big component of what Jesus is trying to teach us. What Jesus is trying to teach us. Jesus describes a master who is about to go away on a journey. Doesn't say where he's going or what he's doing, but he summons the people that are helping him and entrusts each one with a portion of his assets. To one servant, the master gives 5 talents. To the other, he gives 2 talents. And to the third, he gives 1. Now, talents at the time were a considerable sum of money. It was like 15 years worth of salary.
Wow.
It's a lot of money. A lot of money. And I envision the crowd that was gathered there. You have peasants and fishermen and herders, all different kind of workers. And as they were listening to this parable, they were like dreaming about, oh, if he could pick me to take care of this money. Oh, I would do this with it, I would do that with it. Oh, I could see some of you dreaming about winning the lottery. And what you do with it.
By your church.
And so we imagine. But that misses the point about being responsible. As Jesus tells the parable, the servant's given the 5 talent invested and doubles the assets, as does the one who receives 2. Both, I would suggest to you, took significant risks. Now, if we have any investors in here, you know that there's no guarantee. There is no guarantee in if you play the market, the stock market, or what other things are there? Annuities. Yeah, if you have investments, there's no guarantee on whether you're going to make money or lose money. So there's a little bit of a risk at taking making these investments. But both of them took risk. And when the master returned, they were both praised and given more responsibility. Now, there's a catch.
Yeah.
Some of you might not want more responsibility. But let me tell you, too much is given, much is required.
That's right.
And so many times people have a lack of mentality that they forget that there's a responsibility to taking out the trash or whatever it might be. Right?
Yeah. Own it.
So the third guy that was given 1 talent was cautious and prudent, and he observed that the master thought was a tough businessman, and a few years ago I did a whole sermon on that. And well, he wasn't pleased if the principal is lost. He thought, this guy's not going to be happy. And so he digs a hole. My problem would be I dig a hole, I forgot where I would dig it.
It's around here somewhere.
But I guess he left himself a note. And he buries the money. He buries the money in the ground, which was what he considered to be a reasonable thing to do. Now, he did not wish to be liable for any loss. When the master returns and the servant calls upon to give the amount, he smugly says he's able to return to the master exactly what was entrusted to him. He can account for it down to the last penny. Maybe he's expecting the master to be pleased that he neither squandered nor risked the master's principal. No great gain was achieved, no harm was done, right? No harm was done.
Yeah.
The cautious servant might be assuming that the master will invite him to join his servants in entering into the joy of the Lord. Now, there's something about being in the presence of God. There's joy there. But here comes the rub. Here comes the rub in the story that must have stunned Jesus' listeners. Maybe it stuns us too. Jesus tells them that this prudent, practical, careful, cautious man was treated very harshly by the master. Not only was his single talent taken away from him, but it was given to others on top of that. Jeez. Right? Instead of getting his invitation to the party, he's unceremoniously thrown into the outer place where all the teeth gnashing happens. Not a joyful place. Now, it's not what you might expect. Just because he was practical and sensible, he gets tossed out. Right? Just because he was cautious and careful, he's thrown out to weep. Just because he was fearful of failure, he's consigned to the corner. Who saw it coming? Who saw it coming? What's Jesus trying to say? Could it be that Jesus' way of saying to his disciples as he anticipates the clash with authorities that will lead eventually to his death, that he plans to go, having entrusted them with a treasure? Could that be? Could it be that Jesus' way of telling them not to bury his message? Could it be he is declaring that if they have the confidence, the courage, the trust that Jesus has in them, that they'll take the wealth of his love, of his compassion, of his goodness, of his righteousness, and they'll take that wealth into the world and multiply that? Could it be? The message of spiritual, financial wealth could be the message. If we have been given a treasure of faith, then we must invest it. Or have we just buried it and forgot where we buried it? Doesn't it make you wonder? It makes me wonder, because this is risky business.
Yeah.
Faith. Risky business, this responsibility, taking this step of living faithfully. I suppose we are all not taught to believe that. Some of us have been led to think that faithfulness and being a good Christian simply amounts to avoiding what's immoral or avoiding sinful things, right? Avoiding things.
Not doing?
The negative, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that.
Wow.
But when you think about how Jesus teaches those who will take up the cross and follow his path, there isn't so much said about what not to do. You know, I heard on the news just yesterday, I think, it was yesterday, the day before, there's a church right down the street here that has Thursday night pub where they drink some beer and talk about Jesus. You know? Very interesting. I don't drink, but some of you do. That might pique somebody's interest. You know, they're beer makers. But they're disciple makers too. Right? They're disciple makers. And they're using that to get to talk about Jesus. Talk about Jesus. Jesus, yeah, pretty clever, I thought.
Jesus drank wine.
Jesus had a great deal to say about what must be done. This is what he says. Take my yoke upon you. He says, follow me. Follow me. Follow my ways. He says, give, and it shall be given. Ask, seek, and knock. He says, feed my sheep. This week, our food pantry served about 50 people.
All right.
Again?
Again.
Oh my God.
Awesome. Thank you, congregation, for helping so much.
Need more.
Yes.
Feed my sheep. And you know, we always invite the folks to church. You never know what's going to happen. Feed my sheep. Watch and pray. Let your light shine, Jesus tells us. Love one another. When you think about the lives that have mattered by making a difference for you and for others, aren't they the lives that risk something? Aren't they the lives that have taken risk and taken these instructions of Jesus seriously, and it probably cost them something? Matter of fact, I know it cost something. Aren't they the people who have the responsibility, and they've worked to fulfill the most significant and meaningful task that they could? I remember a line from Giancarlo Menotti, and this will be familiar to you. He says, hell begins on the day when God grants us clear vision of all that we might have achieved, of all the gifts which we have wasted, of all that we might have done, which we did not do. we have to invest in God. Invest in God's world along with God's precious people. We have to make an investment. It is our responsibility to take the risk to be faithful in all that God has for us. Maybe we need to do some digging up. Amen? Maybe we need to dig up and invest in the opportunities that are right before us. Because there's a lot of opportunities. There's opportunities to serve on the board. There's opportunities to teach Sunday school. There's opportunities to feed the homeless. There's many opportunities that are right here in front of us to make a difference. There's opportunities right here.
Amen.
Maybe we can make an investment in the opportunities. We never know what will happen until we do. We don't know. We won't know until we do something. There's the lives that we might impact by doing something. We might never see the full impact of what's going to happen when we do something. The outcome for us into this parable then, a reliable result for us as investors is that God is in the business of being with us as we feel our responsibility, as we're faithful to that, as we take the risks and we step into the thing that God is calling for us. To make an investment in God is making an investment in one another. Isn't that a responsibility that we would be honored to take? And maybe even enthusiastically undertake
Joyfully.
Yeah.
to take that responsibility, knowing that God is working with you, working with your hands, working with your prayers, working with you. I don't know about you, but I hope that you will step into the responsibility of your faith. God is calling you. Amen?